Good afternoon, and welcome to this candidate forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters for the Duluth City Council District 2. District 2 consists of precincts 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. My name is Susan Nelson, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Duluth, as well as a trained and certified League of Women Voters moderator. I have the pleasure of moderating this forum. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I'd like to welcome everyone here. The League is pleased to present this general issues pre-election forum for Duluth City Council District 2. Thank you, candidates, for your willingness to participate in local government and in this event. The League of Women Voters believes that an informed citizenry is the foundation of effective democracy. The League is open to membership for men and women who are interested in nonpartisan civic participation. The League of Women Voters realizes that creative and innovative policies and practices are forged out of diverse points of view. We believe diverse perspectives are necessary for responsible and representative decision-making. Let us pause to acknowledge our commitment to welcome and facilitate diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of our work. We strive to include people from a mix of abilities and backgrounds in all our activities, and everyone is invited to join us. For more information, check our website at www.lwvduluth.org. The League is a nonpartisan volunteer organization that works at the local, state, and national level to encourage citizens to participate in government. While we as a League do study and take stands on issues, we do not endorse or support political candidates or parties. The views expressed today are those of the candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters of Duluth. Additionally, our sponsorship of this forum is not a League endorsement of any of the individual candidates participating. And we encourage everyone to remember to exercise their right to vote on Tuesday, November 2nd. At this time, I'd like to introduce our two candidates. We have Mike Mayo and Dave Zabraki. Our forum will begin with the candidates giving a 2-minute opening statement, followed by the questioning round. The questions have been vetted by our Voter Services Committee. Candidates were not given the questions in advance. Each candidate will be given up to 1.5 minutes in which to provide their response. The questioning round has been set up so that each candidate will be asked a question in rotating order. The order in which the candidates will respond was determined by drawing cards, and we will rotate the responses during the afternoon. After the questioning is completed, each candidate will be allowed a 2-minute closing statement. I will be timing you using my trusty phone, and we have time cards to show you. So we will begin with opening statements, and the person who drew number 1 is candidate Mayo.
Thanks. So, hi everyone, my name is Mike Mayo. I grew up here in Duluth out in Lakeside, graduated from Duluth East and then UMD, and majored in management information systems and marketing in the business school. And I currently work up at UMD in the admissions office in marketing and part-time with our Duluth Public Schools in technology. I chose to stay in Duluth, and I really love this community because of the great assets we have here, whether it's Lake Superior, our great parks and trails, the really interconnected community where seemingly you know everyone, but you really don't. You always find someone from Duluth no matter where you're going, and it always draws me back, especially Lake Superior. I'm running because I really believe that we must ensure Duluth is a place where everyone can thrive. There are a lot of problems that we're working to address right now, and I think we're making good progress, and we can build on that. Some of the issues that I'm running on include expanding access to affordable housing across our city and making sure that everyone can afford to live here because we all want to live in Duluth for these reasons. We should all be able to. Making sure that we're protecting our environment for generations to come and really making sure that future generations can continue to enjoy the Duluth that we are today. And also ensuring that we have an economy that really works for all of us, protecting our workers as well as our businesses and making sure that everyone is making a fair wage and once again can afford a living and afford a lifestyle here. I'm really looking forward to being a responsive leader for the 2nd District, and I've been knocking on doors and engaging with community groups, having conversations, and I'm really excited to continue the tradition of responsive representation that we've had here in the 2nd District. So thanks to the League and PACT-TV for hosting today, and look forward to the questions.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go to candidate Zabraki.
Yeah, thank you so much to the League of Women Voters and to PACT-TV for hosting this forum. I was at this one a couple months ago, and it was a lot of fun. Had a great exchange of ideas. My name is Dave Zabraki. I am also an Easton UMD grad and spent most of my time growing up in Duluth. Studied political science and history and a minor in geography. I guess I've always been drawn to politics in that way, and really like to serve my community in elected office at some point. Yeah, I'm mostly a stay-at-home dad. My kids are almost 8 and 10. We had the chance, my wife's a physician with Essentia Health, and then she's also in the 148th Fighter Wing. We had a chance to really move wherever we wanted in the country, but we wanted to be in Duluth because it's an awesome place to raise kids, and since both my wife and I grew up here, we wanted the kids to have that same experience as well. My campaign slogan is "Let's build a better Duluth." That starts with better neighborhoods, with connected streets, connected neighborhoods with accessible streets for all users, better economy, family-sustaining jobs for folks, especially retaining our college graduates, and a better government, fully funding street and sidewalk repair as well as public safety.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the questions that were solicited and submitted by the organizing committee. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond. And the first question is going to go to candidate Zabraki. First question: the city recently decided to transfer promotion of tourism from Visit Duluth to a Twin Cities firm. Many stakeholders felt left out of the process and questioned the decision. Describe your views on both the process and the outcome.
I think that from talking to counselors that were involved in that it was an open process. There were a number of organizations that filed for that, or that submitted bids, I should say. And talking to, I should say, let me backtrack a little bit. I understand that the optics of the situation are not great, but at the same time, talking to folks that were involved in that process, they said that one organization really stood out. Furthermore, after talking to a few friends of mine that are in the business community and are by no means a representation of the business community as a whole, essentially, Visit Duluth was a member-supported organization that was receiving taxpayer dollars, and I sort of liken it to taxpayer dollars going right to the Chamber of Commerce, something like that. And so I think having a new approach to our tourism marketing will be good, and we'll see what the new folks have to offer.
Okay, thank you. And candidate Mayo.
Thanks. So I think that we really we should thank, first off, Visit Duluth for their 85 plus years of service to our community. They were our destination marketing organization for a long period of time. And I do think that with a long history, there are positives and there are negatives, and sometimes you can become focused on promoting one area of town and not see the other areas that we could really expand into. So I do think it's really important that we had this process and that there was kind of a competitive process. But I think that my concern overall is with Belmont Partners in particular being from the cities and using a South Dakota creative firm. I would like to see local creatives being used for this, as well as I do have concerns from my marketing background and talking with others who are in the industry, whether it's here or down in the cities, with a destination marketing organization versus a PR firm. Belmont Partners is a PR firm, and our city administrative officer is going to kind of play the role of oversight of this organization, which usually there is an organization and a board that kind of has direct oversight with some marketing background. So I would like to dig into that a little bit further, and I have some questions potentially for administration about how that will work moving forward. But I think we need to get on board and really make sure that this is going to work for our city, because Belmont's going to be our new partner now.
Okay, thank you. Our next question will go first to candidate Mayo. And that question is, have we chosen the best path for dealing with downtown issues surrounding homelessness, substance abuse, and mental health? What further steps are needed?
Thanks. So I'm assuming this question is kind of surrounding some of the recent decisions made with social workers and the Greater Downtown Council asking for a chunk of money, $300,000, to be allocated towards a social worker downtown or a street worker. I think that the most important thing with processes like this moving forward, and also looking at the past, is that there's really communication between all partners, and really, really transparent and clear communication, because from my understanding, there were several important groups left out of some of these early decision-making decisions, and there is a group of folks, the Affordable Housing Coalition, and some folks from the police department and others who really would have liked to see this be hired locally for this specific position. So once again, similar to the Visit Duluth decision, I think now that a decision has been made, we need to really support it moving forward, but looking back and also looking at what we can do in the future surrounding decisions like this, I really would like to see better communication and more transparency early on, so that all community stakeholders are brought to the table and we can really be clear about where funds are moving to and from, and who's involved and how we're hiring for these positions.
Okay, thank you. And then we go to candidate Zabraki.
I support the decision to hire a social worker. I think that hopefully that can bring a little bit more of a collaborative process to some of the issues that face our downtown. I'm also, I would like to see moving forward, I think, if Duluth wants to take that next step, we really need to have more investment in our downtown. I think downtown needs to be just more than a place where folks do business during the day. It should be a place where people can live and gather and have that other aspect going on. Because most communities that are thriving have a thriving downtown, and so hopefully this social worker that's hired there can help us move forward with that.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to the next question, which would go to candidate Zabraki. And that question is, as a city councilor, what will you do to address the issues that underlie the problem of decreased graduation rates and worsening health disparities for Native American students and populations?
Well, that's an excellent question. I think it does speak to a little bit of a larger issue as a whole in Duluth, and it's not unique to Duluth, but I really think, we talk a lot about affordable housing and a need for it, but I don't think we talk enough about concentrations of poverty in the city, and I think that that's a real big issue, especially someone, from my perspective, living in Congdon and who, had a really, fairly privileged life growing up. you don't necessarily always see what other folks go through, especially when you grow up in that situation, when you're surrounded by individuals, or when you're surrounded by folks who are a lot like you. So yeah, I think there's a lot more that we can do to address those situations. It's a really, really big concern, and not just the Native American community, but other minority communities within the city as well.
Okay, thank you. And candidate Mayo.
Thanks. So I think one of the ways in which we can be better as a city, as well as a community, is really making sure that we're partnering between the city and our school board. And when we're talking about graduation rates specifically, I think that's something that we can really work with our school board and leadership there to see how can we better serve our public schools in the community and bring some of our city resources into our schools. I also think that housing is a very large component of this problem. There are a lot of great ways that we can start investing in underserved communities or historically underserved communities. Some of those examples include rent assistance or credits for home improvements, especially energy efficiency improvements, kind of helping tackle that cycle of poverty. And then also the expansion of resources. We're a really long city. It's hard to, east to west, it's a very narrow and long city. So making sure that we have really good public transportation options for folks, making sure that there's job opportunities across our city, and food resources as well, I think is extremely important, so that everyone can choose what neighborhood they want to live in and not have to look at life expectancy gaps of up to 11 years between some of our east and west neighborhoods. And there are even gaps across the 2nd District as well, so I think this is something that's really important to start addressing as a whole.
Thank you. And since you both mentioned housing, I'm going to jump to a question on that. First to candidate Mayo. Affordable housing projects seem to be springing up everywhere. What measures besides actual construction can help alleviate housing inequities?
Thank you. Yeah, so I will start by saying I'm a very strong proponent of the $19 million of ARP that's being allocated to affordable housing projects here in our community. That includes the creation of an affordable housing trust fund, which is a really, really good step in the right direction. This affordable housing trust fund is going to help developers kind of tackle that cost of developing affordable housing. And I think it's really important that the city continues to kick in dollars, because these projects, especially on the lower end, when we're looking at affordable low-income units, it becomes very challenging for a developer to come into Duluth and say, we're going to be able to do this, and most times they want to turn a profit, or they want to at least break even. It's hard to do if the building costs right now are so high and you don't charge very much for rent. So those are some things that I really think we can start with. I sit on the Duluth Community Development Committee, and there are some really great ways that we can pre-commit our community development block grant funds and our home funds and ESG funds towards projects that in turn attract federal and state dollars in the millions sometimes to help with this. So I really think that this is a problem that the city will need to address, but it's also something that the federal government and the state government are going to have to help out with, because we're kind of limited on our resources, but we could really use some help.
Okay, thank you. Let's turn to candidate Zabraki.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo that, I mean, the city obviously doesn't have the power of the purse like the federal government does, and so if we're going to do something like that, it would require a lot more investment from the federal government. However, I think the $19 million establishing a trust fund, or Mayor's Housing Trust, sorry, fumbling over my words. The trust fund is an awesome thing, and I think we need to make sure that we keep funding it so that we don't exhaust those funds. I also think we need to look at zoning issues. I know that there's a number of states and communities across the country that are just looking at how we think about zoning, and there's lots of historical data on the legacy of single family zoning that's fueled inequalities and things like that over generations. And so I think that there's things that we can do to bring other options out there. And then, yeah, as far as the property developers go, I have a very dear friend who works in property development, and yeah, I mean, basically, the square footage cost for building affordable housing versus the square footage cost of building luxury housing is, we'll just say it's not really all that different. So it's kind of a no-brainer to, build the luxury housing because you can charge more money. But I think there's ways that we can, give them tax credits and stuff like that, which we already do to a certain extent to help them build more affordable units.
Thank you. Okay. We'll next turn to the subject of the environment and climate change. And our question will be directed first to candidate Zabraki. The city has been shoring up our coastline in Canal Park and Brighton Beach. What additional projects will be necessary to protect against the wide range of climate challenges?
Oh boy, that's a pretty broad question. I guess one of the things the thing that I'll start out with is I saw that news story on CNN that talked about Duluth being a possible climate refugee destination, or the area around Duluth, and it was sort of an overlay of maps of water availability and temperature ranges, and there was some other factor in there, and I guess that's all true, but if there's one thing that we've seen even just in the last 10 years of being here is that those 100-year storms are happening every few years now. And so that's done a number to our lake walk. I think what we've done to help preserve that, or to help improve that so that it sticks around, is super important. Stormwater systems, those are obviously important as well. As far as other things that we can do, I guess off the top of my head, I can't quite think of them, but I also think that there's steps that we can do to help modernize our fleets. I think the future is definitely going to be electric powered, and I think that there's things that we can do as a city to move in that direction.
Thank you. And we'll hear from candidate Mayo.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll start by saying you mentioned shoring up some of our shorelines. I think it's important bringing a little relevancy to the second district. We do have some shorelines in the second district that are in need of some reinforcement, particularly down by the ledges and Beacon Point, which have eroded over the years, and we actually lost one of our assets of the lake walk kind of path that goes around the ledges, so that was unfortunate, but something that hopefully between owners at the ledges and maybe in partnership with the city, we can kind of build that back up there. I also think it's really important. Our city passed a climate emergency resolution within the past year here, and we're building out a climate action work plan, which should be ready by the end of the year, really making sure that we're advancing our goals of cutting carbon emissions, both as a city ourselves, and then looking out into our municipal residential homes as well. There are some ways we can really cut our carbon emissions by working with our utility comfort systems and requiring or incentivizing some of our current and new builds to move away from gas as the primary source of heat, which is a large source of carbon emissions locally. We can also invest in green energy manufacturing, partnering with our port, because we have a great port here in Duluth. It's one of our biggest assets. And then really being cognizant of what's going on around us and making sure that projects in the region impact us as well, especially if something were devastating to happen, because we all share the same air, land, and water. There are no boundaries to that.
Thank you. Okay. Our next question will be directed first to candidate Mayo. A lack of affordable child care seems to be keeping some people from employment opportunities. What should the City Council and City Administration be doing to promote greater availability and affordability of child care in Duluth?
Yeah, this is a big challenge that many folks across Duluth are facing right now. I think it's really hard to even, during this pandemic, kind of fathom, okay, how do we start how do we work at the same time as taking care of our children and affording a living here, which can be very difficult even if you just take children out of the equation. But when you have kids and you need a place for them to go during the day, it's a really big problem. Councillor Forsman, I believe it was about a year and a half ago, brought some resolutions forward that really helped kind of change some of the rules and regulations we have around establishing childcare in Duluth, and I think that we need to move forward on that and continue to make it less challenging. And also, it's been very hard for a lot of folks I've talked to who are in the childcare business, trying to find folks that will work for them and make sure they have enough staff and resources. But even just getting that business started in the first place is very difficult. So kind of making sure that we're making it as easy as possible to walk into it and say, here's what I need to start a childcare daycare place out of my house or out of a new business, and making sure we're upfront with that process as a city.
Thank you. Okay, let's hear from candidate Zabraki.
Yeah, I mean, childcare is huge. I mean, as a stay-at-home dad, basically the biggest reason why I don't do more work outside of the home is because I would essentially have to be I think we figured it out, that would be about $50,000 a year just to support the childcare. And then between my wife's crazy schedule, it's just not really worth it. I can also say as a stay-at-home dad with COVID, that's been especially tough. My son was identified as a close contact at school last week, and all of a sudden I was teaching second grade, so for the week and online, and so that's been especially challenging. But yeah, I consider Councillor Forsman a friend of mine. He's also the only councillor that has young kids, and I can see why that's such a huge issue for him and his wife and for this community as a whole. One of the major barriers to entry into the workforce is just making sure that folks have affordable childcare. So, yeah, some of the work that he's done with zoning and licensing and finding grants and things like that for childcare are huge, and we need to keep moving forward with that work to support our families.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Our next question will be directed to candidate Zabraki, and it is: communities across the country began to consider alternatives to traditional models of policing, where police officers respond to all 911 calls. Share your thoughts on what sort of policing models and/or any reforms that would best serve the Duluth community.
Sure. And Mike's going to probably talk about this too, but I screened with the Democratic Socialists. I knew they were going to endorse my opponent, but I felt like it was important to have a conversation with them. And they had talked about having a crisis response team that can respond to calls that don't necessarily, where you don't necessarily need, cops with guns and things like that, potentially escalating the situation. I'm really proud to have the endorsement of the Duluth Police Union. I know that they do an exceptionally tough job. I told them that, and they certainly agree that if there's, ways that they can do policing differently, they're very much all for it. I do get concerned with some of the rhetoric behind, like, defund the police and stuff as it just being, I think a lot of the ideas behind defunding and allocating resources other places would actually be beneficial to police departments, but it's also, we need to also think about that rhetoric and what that can do to community trust.
Okay, thank you. And candidate Mayo, excuse me.
Don't jump the ship quite yet here.
Yes, right.
I want to start by acknowledging that here in Minnesota, within this past year, we've dealt with, past year and a half, we've dealt with a lot of struggle over this issue in particular, with the deaths of George Floyd and Dante Wright more recently, Breonna Taylor, many others around the country. that have been murdered by police. And there are a lot of changes that need to happen. One of those changes that I'm really supportive of, and I was really excited to see it brought to the council actually after we had been discussing it with some local groups, and then it came forward as part of the American Rescue Plan funds, is that crisis response team, which is, in my opinion, it's a pro-police proposal. It had the support of police officers as well here in Duluth, but it's taking police officers off of calls because they're so busy doing so many things. And putting social workers and EMTs in those calls where they can best really handle crises related to homelessness and mental health crises as well. So I think it's really best that we're addressing the resources, or addressing these crises with the resources that are most relevant to them. I'm also a proponent of the NAACP, the Duluth NAACP's calls to stop the stops, or stop the pretextual stops here in Duluth. As someone who has gone for a ride along and seen some other ways in which police go about their jobs, I think it is important that we're really not trying to pull people over for little incidents in order to investigate other potential crimes. So those are some of the things that I think we can start with, and I'm really looking forward to collaborating with some local groups on this issue.
Thank you. Okay, since there's only two of you, we will be able to squeeze in, I think, a few more questions. Let's try this one. In May, and this would go to candidate Mayo. I mean, sorry about that. And you're not even a representative, you're a counselor, so, right? So let's use the right terminology.
Hoping.
Yes.
Yes, right. Candidate Mayo. In May, the Duluth City Council voted to rescind its mask mandate. If COVID cases continue to increase significantly, what measures would you support to mitigate the spread of coronavirus?
Thanks. We've dealt with the pandemic now for the past, it's been a year and a half, almost 2 years it seems like now. It's hard to tell time because the pandemic has just put a stop and kind of worry into so many people's daily lives. Masking is something that I think is extremely important when we're talking about science and we're talking about trusting the public health experts. I'm proud to be endorsed by the Minnesota Nurses Association, and I know that our nurses and a lot of our frontline workers, they count on us as just everyday people to be wearing masks and to be preventing the spread. I think that we did obviously rescind the mask mandate, but I would be in favor of, especially now with the Delta variant continuing to spread, starting to ease back into those masking restrictions if possible, because we are getting to a point where it's a little bit unsustainable in our case rise. And some public health experts, especially Michael Osterholm down in the cities, have recommended that we maybe move back towards those mask mandates. I also think it's extremely important we're encouraging vaccination. I'm fully vaccinated and I hope to be getting my 3rd dose soon, but that's something that really spreading those resources across our community and being in every place that anyone could imagine, walking into a grocery store and being able to get your vaccine. I think that's something that we need to continue to do to make sure that we're getting to those high vaccine rates.
Okay, thank you. Let's hear from candidate Zabraki on COVID mitigation.
Yeah, I have, I was just a lackey liberal arts major, but I have a number of members of my family who are in the medical field. My father's a dentist, my wife's a physician, my brother's a physician. I have 2 cousins that I'm very close to that are also physicians, and my sister-in-law is also a physician. So we deal with COVID a lot. As far as like COVID numbers and stuff go with hospitalizations in the area, those are certainly rising, but it's also rising a lot with problems with staffing and hospitalizations rising for other reasons. And so it's kind of a touchy situation in the hospitals. I know for our kids especially, my kids are still wearing masks at school. And that's gone over, pretty well. They were able to have mostly full school year last year with one interruption. We've had one interruption this year. We even signed our kids up to do vaccine trials if they were available in this area. And we're certainly excited for those to be approved so that we can get our kids vaccinated. And, the more and more of us that can get vaccinated, the more we slow down the transmission, and more we can put COVID as a major issue, as a pandemic, more we can make it, and we're not going to get rid of it completely, but the more we can make it not at the forefront of our lives, that would be really, really nice.
Thank you. Speaking of the pandemic, let's follow up with a question to candidate Zabraki. How well is Duluth bouncing back economically after the pandemic?
I think Duluth was interesting. I talked to a friend of mine that's been in the hotel industry in Duluth for a while, and she talked about like how, even through the COVID summer last summer, how the hotel bookings were actually they got more and more every single weekend, and so I actually think in that sense, we've rebounded fairly better than I would have thought. But obviously, there's still a lot of businesses and families out there that are hurting, and we need to do more to support them. I'm also really excited at Dan Hartman taking over the deck. I think we knew that those large conventions and things like that were things that were going to be some of the last things to come back, and some of those sporting events. And so I'm really excited to see some of the changes and stuff that can happen there. That because we know that that's such a cornerstone for our community. As having the deck as a resource there. So, yeah, I guess to summarize, better than I would have thought, but still more to go.
Thank you. And let's hear from candidate Mayo on that subject.
Thanks. So I think it's really encouraging to know and to hear news that tourism is up, and we're going to have some potential boosts in the tourism tax funds over this next year. That was something that we really missed back in 2020 during the pandemic. A lot of people didn't want to go out and didn't want to, go out to eat or do different things in our community. But now we're starting to see some more of that activity come back to Duluth, and I think that's really important. Part of that, I think, is spurred by the support for small businesses we've had with those ARP funds, and I'm really hoping that we can pass some of these major infrastructure bills so that we can continue to have money to use from the federal government to support small businesses and support that kind of rebuilding Duluth and rebuilding America. I also think that we've had some challenges we ran into in the past year economically. The shuttering of Verso paper and now the loss of AAR. Those were really, really difficult, and hundreds of jobs were lost in those two facilities. But now we do have STC paper moving into the Verso facility, which is really exciting, and we helped make that happen as a city by providing them some funds and some credits there. And I think that's really important that we're continuing to support those businesses as a city where it's viable and where we can bring jobs back to Duluth, especially across our city.
Okay, thank you. And I think just to clarify, you've referred a couple times to the ARP, which I believe is the American Rescue Plan, so it's money from the federal government coming in. Okay, our next question will be addressed to Representative Mayo, and it is: the current city council is more diverse than it has ever been, representing communities of color and LGBTQ plus communities, in addition to age and socioeconomic groups. How would you as a city council member ensure that all Duluth resident voices are included in important discussions and decision making?
Thank you. Yeah, it's really encouraging to see that our council is really diverse and we have a lot of perspectives being brought forward. I ran a couple years ago for reasons very similar to why I'm running this year, to really bring people and voices to the table and to listen to and to learn from constituents across the city. Something that I've really been encouraged by is when I go out door knocking or just having conversations with folks around Duluth or in the district specifically, is the reasons why they love our city and how we can make it better. There are so many things to love about Duluth. I've enumerated some of them in my opening, but I think it's really, really important that we're bringing a lot of different perspectives to the table. Myself as a young person, I can bring that perspective, and I do recognize my privilege that I am a straight white male, that it is, I am coming in with a lot of privilege and stepping away from that and saying, okay, what can I do to best serve all of our constituents across Duluth, and also listen and learn from the experiences of people who are not like me. So I really want to help do that as a council member, and especially for District 2, it's been really, really enlightening for me to talk to college students, to talk to people that have lived in the district for 30 plus years, and to people who are just moving to Duluth within the past 1 or 2 years from other communities, and what brought them here, and what we can do to make Duluth the best city for everyone.
Thank you. Let's hear from candidate Zabraki on diverse voices.
Yeah, I mean, newsflash, both Mike and I are straight white guys, and I think it's, as Mike said, it's really important to recognize that privilege. For me personally, I grew up in Duluth, and then when I got married, my wife did her clinical rotations for medical school on the south side of Chicago, and so we lived there for about 2 years, and our daughter was born there. We're part of a community, went to church, grocery shopping, the whole bit. But I'll tell you what, as a white kid from Duluth, Minnesota, who, used to be a Republican and just had immense loads of privilege and acknowledged some of that, but definitely not all of it. That was an extremely powerful experience, because when you live in a community where most of the people don't look like you, it's really eye-opening. And so it made me think a lot more about, again, listening to other folks, trying to listen to other folks' experiences, and how valuable it is. And also, one of the most powerful things about that was that, you see so much stuff about south side of Chicago in news media and things like that. And what was really powerful to me was to see that even in the midst of, lots of violence and things like that, that people really still cared about their community, and they still wanted to make it better, and they were trying to be resilient. And that gave me a lot of hope.
Thank you. Okay, our last question will begin with candidate Zabraki. And please give an example of how you work within a group to move toward consensus.
I'm trying to think of specific examples. I guess I'll talk about being a ski coach. When you'll have like a group of folks together, and you have different ideas for training, and come together, and you try to figure out a plan, try to take the best strengths of all. I think it's also just important to understand, especially as someone who wants to be in public services, it's important to admit when you're wrong, and to be humble about it too. And I think that really helps a collaborative process too, because sometimes you can, it's like a story from an old college comp professor. There's a difference between saying mistakes were made and I made a mistake. And so I think making sure that you're always upfront about your faults and your shortcomings and things like that are really important to building a collaborative process, and listening to people that might know more than you on specific issues, and coming to a better conclusion.
Thank you. And candidate Mayo, how do you move toward consensus?
Yeah, I think it starts with asking good questions, digging in, really making sure you know all of the details before you're moving forward. And then something that I really love to do in any group or board or committee that I've sat on is really trying to find common ground with each and every person on that committee, regardless of if it's something that's political or personal or value-based or vision for Duluth. There's always something you can find. We have a lot of perceived you're either on this side or the opposite side. And I really think that the majority of Duluthians and the majority of Americans, we really want to see our government working for us rather than being a divide. So building those relationships is really important for me. It's something that I've already done leading up to this year, working with other counselors and having one-on-one meetings and really making sure that I'm ready to step into this role and also to work collaboratively and to find those areas of common ground to work with each other. And I also think, like Dave said, it's important to look to the experts for facts and to bring those into the conversation. I think that's a really great way to build consensus, is when we're relying on the people who know the most about these subjects. Then we can really form, better opinions about what we're discussing.
Thank you. That completes the prepared questions, so we are going to move on to the final statements. And since candidate Mayo went first on the opening statements, we'll begin the closing statements with candidate Zabraki. 2 minutes.
Yeah, again, just thank you so much to the League of Women Voters and the PACT-TV for hosting this. Thanks so much for Mike for being here. I've gotten to know Mike over the last, I think, I stepped into city politics about 4 years ago. And, we're not close friends, but I still consider him a friend of mine. And, I think no matter who wins, if it's me, I want to do my best job. But I also think if Mike wins, he's going to be a great and responsive counselor. If you want to find out more about Building Better Duluth, you can follow me on Facebook or check out my webpage. Or been hitting up the doors and stuff like that, and it's been a lot of fun. It's always hard as a political candidate. I think you have this deep down feeling of rejection that's going to happen, and then you go up and you knock on doors and you just find out that most people are just really appreciative that you came by and that you wanted to have a conversation. So this has been a really rewarding process. Been fun getting to know different people and getting to know more about the issues. And just thanks for everyone that wants to help build a better community.
Thank you. And we'll hear a closing statement from candidate Mayo.
Well, thanks once again to the League for hosting and to PACT-TV for helping make this a reality. I think it's especially great that in this time of COVID that we're able to still have these candidate forums, maybe not with an audience, but with a virtual audience at least. So that's been really encouraging to me to be able to have this kind of engagement still. So this November, please remember to get out and vote. November 2nd, early voting is already open. You can vote down at Duluth City Hall, or absentee balloting is also an option. And I would really, really appreciate your support. I'm really proud to have the endorsements of groups like the Minnesota Nurses Association, Duluth for Clean Water, the Duluth Firefighters Local 101 Union, the Minnesota DFL, as well as just recently today, the Duluth News Tribune Editorial Board. And there were a lot of issues that we talked about throughout this forum that I think just continue to remember them and think about them not just through this election, but after. Talking about affordable housing, talking about climate change, public safety, and really making sure that we're properly funding public safety at the same time as making sure it works for all of us as residents and having public safety that's responsive to our community. And also making sure that we have an economy that works for all of us. I talked about this in my points, but really making sure that our workers are making a living wage to afford a lifestyle here in Duluth. I'm really excited to work for the residents of Duluth and particularly the 2nd District. It's been really great to engage with constituents across the district throughout these past several months, and I look forward to continuing to knock on doors and to attend events and have these conversations as we're moving forward in just under a month already to November 2nd. So it's been a really great journey so far. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation. I'd like to thank Dave as well for being here. It's been great to get to know the candidates, to get to know these issues more, and looking forward to earning your support. Thank you.
Thank you. So this concludes this candidate forum for the Duluth City Council District 2 seat. It is our purpose in sponsoring meetings such as this to provide everyone with an opportunity to hear the candidates discuss the issues that are important to you. There is never enough time to cover all of the issues in a limited time setting such as this. So if your questions were not answered, you should feel free to contact the candidates directly. We hope this program has helped you learn more about the candidates and issues so that you can make informed choices at the polls on Tuesday, November 2nd. So we thank the candidates, Mike Mayo and Dave Zabraki, PACT-TV, and you for making this event possible. PACT-TV will carry this forum and others. Check their listings for a schedule of times. Links to these forums will also be on the League of Women Voters Duluth website. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.